So, good evening, you guys. I want to talk about AEW All Out. And I went to the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I always tell people it's a little harder to review AEW when you see it live because you can't keep track of all the action. But definitely, I was saying that, tonight my feeling about AEW is that it ultimately had to have a goal of restructuring the company, because I do feel that there's really no point to having matches, and there's really no point for AEW to really exist right now and compete with WWE unless they're actually doing a lot of restructuring. That means that there's a lot of divisions that have been lacking. So ultimately, we're going to see where everything goes and stuff like that. So I think that AEW's had an issue of being in a run around in circles and stuff like that, spinning their wheels. So I think like tonight, I'm going to talk about all the matches and what happened on the show and what I feel is the best direction for AEW and if they accomplished having a show which leads to a really good direction. The first match was Joe and Hobbs versus the Workhorsemen, and this was kind of really like a jobber type of match in my opinion because technically the Workhorsemen, they've been a Ring of Honor. You give them some offense, but not a lot of offense. But you put in a lot of good work from Hobbs and Samoa Joe doing like powerlifting and other stuff like that. Really, so it was just a regular match. I do agree with a lot of people that I really wish that they did have a trios match, and they really set up like a good trios match. Like, who are their next opponents? What can they do with the trios title? So I feel like that I don't really see. I think tonight they didn't really do a lot with any of the trios divisions. Like with the trios division, that was like because there's so many different like trios teams that they have, like Dalton Castle and the Outlanders and a few other people as well. Really, So I really feel like they didn't do a lot of the trios division. But overall, it was a good match. It was a good showing of Joe and Hobbs. If they ever want to become a tag team, I'm hoping to do a trios match with the Hurt Syndicate in the future. I really want to see that, but we'll see what happens, really. The next match was Danny Garcia versus Katsuyori Shibata. It was kind of really predictable. They did a good about a back and forward and stuff like that. Shibata got a lot of offense in the beginning, but Danny Garcia ends up winning, and Marina Shafir helps him out a little bit. So, technically, he's just trying to find his role within the Death Riders. But obviously, you kind of know that Shibata was going to lose because obviously they want to build Daniel Garcia strong. And then more than likely the reason why they had Joe and Hobbs versus the Workhorsemen is to be like, okay, we're going to throw the Ops a bone, really. They're going to win a match and they're going to lose a match. The next match was a tailgate brawl. I felt a little confused by this match because the issue was that when they fought a lot in the ring. So a lot of people got confused because they fought for a long time in the ring, and then they kind of revealed later through some of the stuff that they're doing. They did a bunch of hardcore stuff, and then they also did a lot of stuff with a staple gun, and I wish they didn't do that because you had like a couple of very bloody matches on the card, so it kind of just did not make sense for just to have a lot of just like just repeating the same type of stuff, really. Sometimes, and with a tailgate brawl, this is meant to be like funny and silly, just like with all like the really campy girls on the roster. So I feel like just having like a staple in the match just really didn't work and stuff like that. And then you also have things like Queen Aminata eating like some fruit and other things like that. So it's almost like you had to pick a lane if you're gonna make it kind of like a more fun type of match. You don't need to have extremely violent stuff like a staple gun. Just like when WWE does a 34th Street fight or a Halloween street fight, they know to say, okay, we're doing something for the kids. We're going to throw candy corn. We're going to throw candy at other wrestlers, and someone's going to land in the audience, and they're going to get some candy. So so they just need to really pick, they need really to pick the right amount of violence. And I felt like they overdid it with the staple thing. And then it was also bad because Tony Storm did staple spots a few weeks ago. So it's kind of like a little repetitive. You started with Adam Copeland and Christian Cage versus FTR. It really felt like a Dave Meltzer match where there was a lot of cliffhanger. There was a lot of times where you thought it was going to end a certain way. Like, there were times where you thought FTR was going to end it. There were times we thought Adam Copeland and Christian Cage were going to end it. Then you had interference from Beth Phoenix and then ultimately Adam Cole and Christian Cage win. However, at the very end, Nick Wayne and Mom Wayne come out, and then they cause a distraction. So FTR attack Christian and Copeland, and then also they attack. They also attack Beth Phoenix as well. Really, so they're kind of setting up, maybe a longer feud, maybe like a table ladders and chairs match between the teams. I really want to see that. It does kind of make me a little interested to see what the direction is, because Kip Sabian and Nick Wayne just become a tag team. So it's almost like, what do you do with them, the next, 12 months with them? Like where are they? Because Kip Sabian's kind of been a lackey type of character. I think he's somebody who needs to be released because there's really no future for him. He just looks kind of like a goth version of Johnny Depp, really. And then with Nick Wayne, he's the prodigy. I really think they're trying to make him like, trained by Darby Allin, or they're trying to make him like, this kind of like this young up and coming wrestler, really. So I really just think that he's another one of those wrestlers that you really don't know what his future looks like. I don't think he even has a future in professional wrestling, because, he looks like a college freshman. He's like that really skinny ass body. So it's like, if you bring him to WWE, how well is he going to do there? If you bring him to TNA, how well is he going to do there? If you bring him to the independents, how well is he going to do there, really? Like, he might be better just, going to New Japan Pro Wrestling and being there, because they're really about more of the matches than the acting and stuff like that. So I think that might be the best fit. I don't think AEW is a good fit for him, because like I said, he doesn't have any muscle on his bones, really. So I kind of wonder his future as well, really. But I really think this is going to lead to Adam Page and Copeland and Christian Cage versus FTR and Nick Wayne in a, table ladders and chairs match. Or you may see, Beth Phoenix get involved with it as well, really. So it's going to be really interesting to see what their future looks like. But I do think it's kind of going to... It's a little predictable. It's going to be a little bit of this repeat type of thing, really, But I also feel good in a way, because I don't want to see Adam Copeland and Christian Cage hold the tag team championships, because there's so many other, tag teams on this roster, really. So it's kind of almost like, you think to yourself, do you really want two 50-year-old guys to be on the top of the tag team division? Do you want two 50-year-old guys who have a lot of backstage pull to be on top, really? Because it just doesn't look like, it's just not a good look, really. So I'm happy they're continuing this thing with FTR. They can have another table ladders and chairs match and then just move on to something else, really. The next match is Big Bill versus the debuting Eddie Kingston. And, with Eddie Kingston, yeah, they got a large reaction from Eddie Kingston. People were really, really happy to see him. He did this really cool spot where he lifted Big Bill. And there's some people just saying, too, when he came back, he was still kind of like that chubby Eddie Kingston. But I really don't give a fuck, Like Eddie Kingston's Eddie Kingston. And then at the very end of the match, he gets ambushed, and who saves him is Hook. So I really think that what AEW needs to do, in my opinion, is they need to have a tournament, a tag team tournament. I think this is the right time to have a tag team tournament, where, until Wrestle Dream, they should just, have a bunch of tag teams and show everybody what's their new tag team division, because they already have FTR, Adam Copeland, Christian Cage, Eddie Kingston, Hook, members of Don Callis family, Jet Speed. So just to kind of reintroduce the audience to saying, hey, you know what, guys, here's our tag team division. And I think that would actually be a really good, approach. And they can even have another tournament on Collision for the Trios division, and say, hey, the winner's going to face the Trios champions at Wrestle Dream, so that way, you see one thing on Dynamite, you see everything on Collision, you separate the belts, separate the tournaments. But I think with Hook and Eddie Kingston, I'm happy for this, because in my opinion, I was a little afraid that they were going to do Hook versus Samoa Joe, and I think that would be a very bad match. And Hook is not a good talker at all, really. Again, he sounds like a college freshman. He mumbles a lot. He kind of has, he can do wrestling well, but he is somebody that looks like a high school freshman, really skinny ass as fuck, really, so I don't, and he also, too, his music is shit, really. Eddie Kingston music is great, really. So I think that putting Eddie Kingston and Hook together would be really, really good. they can call themselves the New York City Crew or something like that, really. Like so, and then also too, they have Full Gear in at the Prudential Center in New Jersey, really. So I think that seeing them together is a great direction. And I think my other worry about this is Big Bill and Brian Keith. I think Brian Keith, again, he doesn't have a future in this company. He has potential as a wrestler. Maybe he needs to go to TNA, but I think that he needs to be a single star and really find his own direction, really. Because I think, like, he was being Chris Jericho's lackey for a long time. He's kind of lost who he is. But Big Bill, I do feel that, he and Brian Keith need to win matches. Or Big Bill is somebody, like, as I said, if he's not used well in AEW, he needs to go to TNA or something like that. Like, I think that he can do very well, but it's almost like, what do you have from him a year from now? He can't just be the big guy losing matches. That's actually a very bad look for him. So I'm worried about his future. I think Eddie Kingston coming back and going to the tag team division is good. However, I think that another better option would be him versus Okada because, he lost his titles to Okada. So it kind of makes sense for him to kind of go full circle, really. That would be a match to see. The next match was MJF versus Mark Briscoe in a TNT match, Tax and Tables. In the Tax and Tables match, they did a really good job with this. Like, in the beginning, it kind of was like a squash match where MJF was getting a lot of offense in it. And I think you kind of had a sense of doubt, like, is this a burial of Mark Briscoe? And then also, MJF is doing some acting roles. So maybe you thought to yourself, maybe MJF is not taking a bunch of bumps this time because they don't want to ruin his pretty face. But then later on, he started to take some spots, and he did a lot of really crazy shit. They put tacks in Mark Briscoe's mouth. They threw... MJF hits an Alabama slam on Mark Briscoe into thumbtacks. They go through a thumbtack table. They get hit by chairs like with thumbtacks wrapped in it. There's definitely like a lot of hard hitting. And then, rightfully so, and they made a brave decision. They made Mark Briscoe win because Mark Briscoe is one of those wrestlers where I feel like he needs a lot of victories. He needs a direction, really. And that is very, very important, really, because you can't kind of have wrestlers like him who could be a great TNT champion, who could do a lot for the company, and then just kind of keeping them afloat, really. You really have to pull your trigger. So him beating MJF elevates him, and I'm very, very happy because it was a great match, the right result. And then also, too, MJF doesn't lose by losing this match. And definitely one of the best matches of the night. The next match was Okada versus Takeshita versus Máscara Dorada, if I'm saying his name correctly. And what I would say is that this was the match of the night for me. Like, I felt very bad for Dorada because you knew that he was going to be the jobber of this match. He was going to lose. And that's not a good look for any CMLL wrestler because it's almost like, why should these wrestlers be in AEW when they're going to lose all the time? The same thing when we were talking about Slammiversary, when you had a lot of the when you had the women's and you had the TNA championship go to NXT wrestlers. So so they have to be really careful about bringing CMLL people and having them lose. I actually would have thought it would be better if Dorada won. Like, imagine if he won and then Okada was mad at Takeshita, and then he gave him an ass whooping and the Don Callis family beat him out of the group, really. Like, I think that would have been an interesting angle. But it went on for a long time. There was a lot of really great spots. Like, Dorada did moves that I've never seen before, and he did a lot of reversals and flips and luchador stuff. Like, honestly, that I really think that he has a very, very great future in AEW. Like, imagine Dorada versus Ospreay. That would be an excellent match. Or imagine if he did Dorada and you had another wrestler like Hologram or somebody else be his tag team partner. Like, they could do a lot of great stuff. Or Dorada and Kalistico. Like, you can call them Team El Dorado or something like that. Or something like that, really. Like there's a lot of there's a lot in him that is great. Takeshita did really great stuff this match. He did his Blue Thunderbomb and a lot of really great moves. He really knows how to work with a lot of different wrestlers and do a very good job. Like, honestly, it's a little bad that he's going to Japan and he may become the IWGP champion because he deserves it. He's earned it, but definitely AEW really needs him. Like honestly, too, he's ultimately like just like him and Kyle Fletcher. Like honestly, they're like the Will Ospreays when Will Ospreay's not there. Really, like they really have a lot that they can do, and they have a lot of potential, and they have a lot of shit that they can do and accomplish. Really, so it's ultimately bad if he goes to Japan for a couple of months, because I really think that he really needs to be grounded to AEW and become a mega star there. Really, so. And then also Okada did a really great match, so I do kind of worry what's his direction after this. He and Takeshi are going to have one more match in October. I think that would be the best thing to do. Or you can do something where it's Okada versus Eddie Kingston. I think that would be a really great direction. And then you have the Continental Classic in December, and I think you need to take the title off of him and give it to somebody else, really. Because he's going to be like a 2-year champion with that title. So it's almost like, what do you do, really? And then Okada's like a triple champion. So I kind of like wonder what his direction is going to be. Because you can't have somebody hold 3 different titles of your promotion. And it's almost like you have no direction for that. It would just be like imagine if you had like Mark Henry hold the European, United States, and Intercontinental Championship at one time. Or another wrestler like Ken Shamrock. Or another wrestler in the company, really. So, or even like Kane or whatever. Like, so you have to kind of really have directions for all his titles, or even do something where there's a point where he gives that up, really. So I think that was a really great match. The match of the night went a good amount of time. Dorada did a really great job. He was kind of like the underdog wrestler. Takeshita was kind of like the arrogant prick. And Takashi was somebody who wanted respect because Okada wasn't respecting him. So that match happened. It was the best match of the night. It was long. It was thrilling. They did a really great job with it. The next match on the card was the Hurt Syndicate versus Ricochet. I'm going to start calling him Ricochet Uchiha at the Gates of Agony. So a lot of really good spots in this match. Ricochet did some high flyer stuff. They acted like heels. He knew how to interfere. He knew how to break up pinfalls and other things like that. Hurt Syndicate and the Gates of Agony, they're power lifter type of wrestlers, so they did really great stuff. I was happy that the Gates of Agony and Ricochet Uchiha, I'm going to start calling that Ricochet Uchiha, was starting to win. They won this match because it does not hurt the Hurt Syndicate to lose. And then again, I want to say Powerhouse Hobbs versus Bobby Lashley. So that could be something down in the future, but I really think Ricochet's goal is to be a champion by any means necessary. So I think you have the right heel or babyface dynamic if they go through a bunch of tag teams, a bunch of trios teams, and they face Samoa Joe as Powerhouse Hobbs and Katsuyori Shibata. And I think that'll be the way to do it, really, because you have heel versus babyface. But I also think that the Gates of Agony, like I said before, that when you watch professional wrestling, you can really see people who are doing everything they can to get noticed. Like, they really give a fuck, but the company doesn't have a good direction for them. So I really, really feel with the Gates of Agony, like there's something that happened a few weeks ago that clicked with me. I said, like, you know what, these people are really giving a fuck. So I think that eventually they should be the trios champions. And ultimately, you can't bury them as well, really, because it's almost like, then what do you really do with this company? You can't be burying wrestlers. So I really think that with the Gates of Agony, my hope is that they become the trios champion with Ricochet, because I think they've earned it. They've really paid their dues, and then also Ricochet's paid his dues. He's really revamped his character. So I think the direction should be, the Ops versus, Ricochet and the Gates of Agony. And I think that would be a really great match. And I would like to see the next pay-per-view. So I think that's a great direction. I think the Hurt Syndicate, they just need to kind of just build trios team momentum, or go into the tag team division, try to regain their titles, really. So I do hope that they're not put on the back burner. Or they could do something with like Lashley versus Adam Page. That could be a really great match. But I just hope that the Hurt Syndicate has a really great direction, and they just don't lose momentum. The next match of the night was Mercedes versus Riho. And I want to mention this, that Yeah, like it was an alright match. It's kind of like a high flyer thing. It was a little weird seeing Mercedes because she had like a bunch of men hold her title. So it's almost like, why are these men shirtless? Are they supposed to be? I really thought this reminded me of Dalton Castle and the Boys, really. So it felt a little out of place, really. But they had a really great match. A lot of high flyer stuff. Mercedes won. There was a spot where it looked like Mercedes was trying to like steal something from the referee, like put her hands in his pants and take something, but it kind of didn't really make sense, really. But we also kind of knew Rio was going to lose. But she did a really great job. So I kind of like also wonder the direction of Mercedes because she's kind of been champion for a long time. So it's almost like, how does this really help the company by having her be champion, and there's really no like maybe like challengers or somebody on her level. Like I think it should be Willow Nightingale. A lot of people are saying, or you can have Tony Storm go after the TBS championship just to kind of do something where she wants to be a Grand Slam, because she has to win like the ROH and the TBS championship to kind of like be a Grand Slam, to win like 3 different women's titles. But I do think that again, Mercedes doesn't really have a direction. She's just going to blow through people, but you need to really kind of find, that one opponent that can take her on fairly. Is Tony Storm versus Jamie Hayter versus Tekla. And I want to just mention with this match that it was like a fatal 4-way match, and I don't remember a lot of it, but Tony Storm loses to Chris Statlander, and I think the way they did it, it felt very off guard. Like she just randomly pinned somebody in the corner and had them upside down for a while. So it's almost like you're kind of saying to yourself, like that really came out of nowhere, really. So I felt a little like kind of like like it felt like a little jarring, really. And I kind of said to myself that I'm a little worried about the direction with Chris Statlander, because they're really teasing that she's going to join the Death Riders, and I'm a little worried because it's almost like what do you do with this? Because she's part of the Death Riders. What do you do with Marina Shafir? Do they beat her out of the group? Because it's called banging out. That's when you're in a gang and they beat you up to get in the group, and then they beat you up a bang out to get out of the group. That usually means when you don't do a good enough job, or when you just decide to leave, or when they don't think you're qualified anymore. So are they going to do it with Marina Shafir? Or they're going to have Marina Shafir or Chris Statlander go after the tag team titles, because there's talk about a women's tag team division. So I almost kind of wonder, it's definitely different. It surprised a lot of people, but a lot of people knew that this was going to happen, really. So it's almost like, what are you going to do with Chris Statlander? Or that's going to put the title back on Tony Storm, because you're almost like, we don't have a direction for her. And then the next match was Darby Allin versus Jon Moxley in the coffin match. Unfortunately, I got hungry, so I just had to get something to eat, and I missed the opening part of the match. But this was definitely very brutal and violent. They did a lot of fork in the ear, and they did a lot of screws for the ear. They did a bunch of, there was coffin drops, there was blood everywhere. It was kind of predictable, because I knew that Jon Moxley was going to win, because they're going to continue this, because with both Moxley and Darby Allin, they kind of continue more hardcore, more violent matches, and that's kind of what they both really want and stuff like that. They did a post-match segment where I marked out where Jon Moxley gets he puts Darby Allin in a body bag, and then the body bag gets put into a coffin, and then in the post-match segment, they switch it around where Darby Allin gets out of it, puts Moxley in the body bag, and then he sets it on fire, really. So, I'm really marking out, going crazy, because I think they're going to try to do an Inferno match. There was actually a rumor that there was going to be an Inferno match between MJF and Mark Briscoe, but I think they were saving that. They're going to probably save that between Darby and Jon Moxley. But I do think they have to be a little careful, because they're really spinning their wheels, because that's really what Jon Moxley and Darby do a lot, is a lot of hardcore Daredevil type of shit, really. Like as we said, if you do that way too much, or it's the same people doing that, there's a diminishing return, really. And I really think they've hit that button where they're kind of almost like the Combat Zone wrestling part of AEW. So they don't really do anything different, and that's not a good thing, really. So I think that while they have thrilling, shocking, bloody, violent, Daredevil shit type of matches, I really think that they're both becoming a little flanderized. They both have to do some different shit as well, really. But they keep on upping the ante of hardcore violent stuff. It's you have to pick which wrestlers you do it with, because if it's the same wrestlers over and over, it just doesn't really work really. It's almost like if you had CM Punk and Seth Rollins, and they had a thumbtack match. Then the next week they had a steel cage match, and then they have a Hell in a Cell match. Then they have an Inferno match, and then they have a an exploding barbed wire death match, and then they have a glass pane type of match, like we throw people through glass window shields, and then they had like a last man standing. If you did all that shit with them, it just wouldn't really stand out and stuff like that, because you have to kind of pick and choose when, which wrestlers get which hardcore stuff, type of thing. They did a backstage segment and they talked about that. Orange Cassidy's coming back. They're also trying to get the Acclaimed. Like Jerry Lynn's getting the Acclaimed, gave the Acclaimed a match, and the rule is that they have to have the match on Dynamite next week, or else they are suspended for not teaming up together. So they're trying to also put the Acclaimed back together. There's also a segment where it looks like Jurassic Express is coming back together. So I like all these tag teams coming back together, but it's ultimately, like I've said before, I'll say it again, they have to get to a point of really just saying, okay, there are tag teams that worked, but how are we putting them back together? What stories are we going to tell? What motivations do we have for these tag teams? How are we going to keep these guys relevant? And like I've said before, and I'll say it again, like Dynamite tag team collision trios, because you also have a bunch of wrestlers in the trios division. Like as I said, you have now you're trying to do the Outlanders and Dalton Castle. Like honestly, that would be a tag team that would make a lot of money, really. The metrosexual and these 1980s guys. So hopefully they learn that. So I really just hope that I just really hope that they have a lot of direction with a lot of these tag teams being formed and stuff like that. And I know I was talking about Moxley and Darby Allin, and I took a little bit of a tangent, but it was a good match. We'll see what happens in the future. Really, also Pac came back, so it's almost like, as I said before, and I'll say it again. I think they're trying to tease that they're going to be a tag team of Darby Allin. And I think they should do this: Darby Allin and Bryan Danielson versus Pac and Jon Moxley. I think they need to have that match in the future. So that way they can have a match without Darby and Moxley doing violent shit, because I think that's very important to just show that, okay, they're not just in repeat mode. So I hope they do that, really. The next match was the 4-way ladder match. This was also one of the best matches of the night, really. I think that my top 3 matches would be Okada, Takeshita Dorada is number 1. Number 2 would be Darby Allin, Jon Moxley in the coffin match. I think number 3 would be the ladder match. The main event match with Hangman and Kyle Fletcher. There were like 12 matches before this, so I was going through my match fatigue. And also with the main event, I'll talk about in a minute, it was around 45 minutes of a match, really. So it was kind of one of those Dave Meltzer's, let's take it to the extreme type of thing. But this ladder match was very brutal and vicious. And a lot of ladder spots, a lot through the table spots, a lot through ladder spots, a lot just just really vicious spots in this and everything like that. But I would kind of say that I'm happy they retained. There was a lot of talk about the Young Bucks actually winning this match as well and taking the titles, but I'm happy that didn't happen, because that would just feel a little too repetitive. The other thing that I will say is that, yes, Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy became Jurassic Express again, so that could be something good. And then the last match tonight was Hangman versus Kyle Fletcher. There's so many matches before this that I wasn't really into this, but it really felt like your typical, Dave Meltzer match where it goes on for longer than it needs to go. There's a lot of spots. There's a lot of spots in this match. There's a lot of near falls. When you look at Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher, they're kind of they're kind of like a how should I say they remind me a lot of Will Ospreay without the extreme moves. So they're kind of almost maybe a beta and a gamma version of a Will Ospreay, right? Like maybe like you know like a lesser version of Will Ospreay, really. But that's okay, really, because nobody should be there should be one Will Ospreay. There shouldn't be like copycat Will Ospreys. But went on a long time. Was a good showing for Kyle Fletcher. Also, they violated the 10 count rule. They violated hardcore match rules because there were some spots where they took away the ring. They took away the ring post cushion. There was like a table spot. There were a couple table spots. They were outside the ring for more than 10 seconds. And again, you need to fire referees now. You need to fire referees or whoever's booking matches and saying you can violate 10 count rules. That person needs to be fired because that's not professional wrestling. That's just having rules in a professional wrestling match and violating the rules. You have to have some physics in this. But overall, Hangman won. I knew that he was going to win, really. And a lot of the matches were really predictable. You kind of knew who was going to win. Ricochet in the Gates of Agony, that was a surprise. But all the other matches, you kind of had an idea who was going to win, really. So I think overall it was a really great pay-per-view. I think that, I'm happy that I went to this event. I definitely think that, again, it's just the follow-up. I really think there's a lot of great matches. There's a lot of people returning. They should do a tag team tournament with all the people, with all the tag teams. And they should also have a trios tournament. And then there are some future matches. You can do like another Don Callis member like Josh Alexander versus Hangman Adam Page. Or you can do him and Kyle Fletcher part 2 in a with a stipulation or something like that, really. Or like I think you need to do Okada versus Hangman Adam Page. I think Okada deserves it the most. And I also feel that you can do like a tables, ladders, and chairs match with the FTR versus Christian and Edge, really. So hopefully they just have a good direction. All these wrestlers, you can do something like Mark Briscoe versus Kyle Fletcher, like have them have a match next week. There's interference, there's bullshit, and then they just have a match at Wrestle Dream. So there's a lot of things they can do to tie in, really. And then Ricochet Uchiha gets Agony talk about winning. They're like, hey, we should challenge for a trios title. Let's do this at Wrestle Dream. So there's a lot of things that they can build with what they have right now, and that's what they need to do, really. Then you can even have Eddie Kingston Hook versus Brodito, or you can do Eddie Kingston versus Okada. There's a lot of different things you can do really. So they definitely have a really great direction. It's almost like the pay-per-view set up a lot of good momentum, really. But how are they going to capitalize on that momentum?